Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. And thank you very much indeed for joining this important webinar on Jerusalem, Al-Quds, which is the capital of Palestine. And what we want to look at is the impact of the corona pandemic on the city. As you know, the virus knows no border, so we will probably use Jerusalem and Al-Quds interchangeably, even though it has a specific meaning. So my name is Kamel Hawwash. I'm the chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in the UK, and I'll be moderating the webinar. I'm originally from Jerusalem. Both of my parents were born in the Holy City before Israel was established. And I always say that peace will come to the Holy Land when my mother, who lives here in the UK, can go back to live there if she chooses to. The injustice that is the following. She can't go back to live in Jerusalem, whereas a Jewish woman from anywhere in the UK can get on a flight when they resume to Tel Aviv and will be allowed to enter citizenship and to live there. Because Israel has a law of return which allows Jews to go to Israel, but it doesn't allow Palestinians to return. Some announcements before I introduce the speakers. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on our Facebook page when it works. You can turn your video on if you want, and it's nice to see your faces during the webinar. You can introduce yourself using the chat box at the side. So write a message to say who you are and where you are. It'd be really interesting to see that during the proceedings. And if you have any questions to the panelists, then please can you write them in that chat box, and we'll try and pick a few during the Q&A session. This is scheduled to finish at 8:15. As you know, in the UK, the iftar is at about 8:25. So Ramadan Mubarak to everyone who's fasting, and we'll get going. So we've got 5 great speakers from Jerusalem. Ahmad Al-Budeiri is a Palestinian journalist and the coordinator of the Jerusalem Alliance. Ahmad will tell us about how Jerusalem has reacted to the coronavirus pandemic on the ground and the difficulties the occupation presents. Rawan Al-Dajani is the Deputy Director of the Community Action Center in Jerusalem. And Rawan will talk about the impact on families in the city and relating that to children in particular. We have Dr. Abdulsalam, who will talk to us about the Paediatric, who is president of the Paediatric Society of Palestine, and he'll talk about, he'll give us a medical perspective on the corona pandemic. And then Louay Al-Husseini, who is the Director General of the Arab Chamber of Commerce, will talk to us about the economic impact. But we're going to start in a minute with Dr. Munir Nuseibeh, who is Director of the Al-Quds University's Human Rights Center and the Community Action Center, who will give us an introduction to Jerusalem from a geographic and political perspective and maybe some legal aspects. I've asked the speakers to speak for no more than 10 minutes, and then we'll take questions. So I'd very much like to start by handing over to Dr. Munir Nuseibeh, who is going to talk to us about Jerusalem and the geographic and political perspective.
Thank you very much, Professor Hawwash, and it's really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to speak for your organization, which I really appreciate, and I've known your work for a very long time, and I really appreciate that. Hello to everyone. Good to see you. I've been asked to speak in 10 minutes, giving a general introduction about Jerusalem and about how Jerusalem has been divided over the past years through different boundaries and and how the occupation is dealing with the city. And I'm going to very quickly at the end of my talk mention a number of legal battles, if I may use that term, in Israeli courts and other institutions that are related now to the coronavirus, because we can notice that the coronavirus situation is bringing about some challenges and exposing more and more discrimination and systematic discrimination that the Palestinians in Jerusalem are going through. So let me start by start by sharing my short PowerPoint presentation. Let me start with a quick introduction about Palestine. I know that many of you will probably know this, but I should mention it anyway for everyone who doesn't. Palestine, by the end of the British Mandate in 1940, between 47 and 49, the British Mandate actually ended in 1948. The United Nations was asked to find some sort of a solution for the Palestinian problem. Britain had been pumping in refugees and settlers, Jewish settlers from different places around the world into Palestine, who made 1/3 of the population by the end of the British Mandate. And by that point, the United Nations was asked to find a solution. And of course, I'm just starting from a very specific point in history right now. And the UN suggested that Palestine should be divided into 2 states, and that Jerusalem would be a corpus separatum, which means a specific entity that is administered by the United Nations, not belonging to any of the 2 states, whether the Jewish state or the Arab state of Palestine. What happened on the ground is that a war started during the British Mandate period and ended after the British Mandate ended, in which a state of Israel was established on 78% of the land of Palestine, and Israel managed to conquer Western Jerusalem and to displace 80% of the whole population of Palestine and all of the population of Western Jerusalem at that point. So between 1949 and 1967, Jerusalem looked in the way that you can see here on the map on the left. The western part of Jerusalem was annexed by Israel. The eastern part was part of Jordan at that point, because Jordan took authority over the eastern part of the city. But Jordan introduced a small area called Jerusalem, which is basically 6 kilometers square, the old city of Jerusalem and a little bit around it. But then in 1967, another war erupted, and Israel occupied all the remaining parts of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza. And the eastern part of Jerusalem was also occupied, but something special happened at that war, which is that Israel decided to annex the eastern part of Jerusalem. What does annexation mean? It means that this part of Jerusalem became part of Israel. Israel applied Israeli law in that part, and you can see it here on the map on the right with the blue line that is circling the city. This is the way Jerusalem actually looks like right now from on the map. This is the Israeli municipal line. And from the Israeli point of view, every area that is within that municipal line is part of Israel. But then in 2003, Israel also built a wall which is 9 meters high. And this wall separated different Palestinian communities from each other and divided Jerusalem in a certain way. But that wall did not go along even the lines that Israel itself drew for its municipality. So it did not include inside it, if I may say, all of the area that was annexed by Israel. But on the contrary, it actually left some areas out. So, for example, if you can see, I think you can see my my mouse that is moving, right?
Yes.
So, if you can see here, the area of Kufr Aqab, it is outside. The red line is the line of the wall, the barrier, as it's called here on the map, and this line is the Israeli municipal line. So, what you can see here is that some areas were left out of the wall, but they are still considered by the Israeli, only the Israeli. Of course, it's important to say that this was not recognized by the world, the annexation, but they are, by Israel, it's still called, it's considered to be part of Israel itself, which means that they apply Israeli law and all of that. It's important to mention that Israel never gave citizenship to the Palestinian community living in Jerusalem. They gave us a residency status, so they consider every Palestinian in Jerusalem a permanent resident in Israel, just like immigrants who go to a new country. The first status that they get is a residency. This is the type of status that Israel gave, and it's very problematic because this residency status is easily revocable, unfortunately, and I'm going to express a certain fear at the end of this talk regarding this residency status. So now 8 minutes have gone, so I really have to be quick. And I should mention a number of areas where I can notice legal battles going on. Sorry for this. Okay. 1 second. Legal battles that are going on right now because of the coronavirus problem. And that's basically because of the Israeli, because of Israel not providing the right services in many cases. So the first thing we noticed is that there was a big delay in testing for coronavirus. Israel did not deploy enough clinics and medical services to test people for coronavirus. And now we're noticing, and I'm sure we'll hear from other speakers, that we're noticing an increase in infections that wasn't really monitored at a certain point. At a certain point also, it was noticed that there were no services, no medical services for corona in the areas that are within the Jerusalem municipal areas, but behind the wall. Israel prevents the Palestinian Authority to do anything in these areas, but at the same time, they did not provide any services. So there has been a case that was filed on this issue. Now there are some services, but not enough, as the observers say. Then another problem that we noticed is that Israel has been closing Palestinian testing centers, and this has been already condemned by some UN experts with the justification that they are supported by the Palestinian Authority. And this is a policy that Israel always does in Jerusalem. Everything linked to the Palestinian Authority, they decide to close it down. Another problem is punitive house demolitions. Israel demolishes houses in order to punish families of persons they accuse of terrorism. And this doesn't seem to be stopping, unfortunately, at the time of Corona, despite human rights organizations objecting to that. And the last two things I will mention very quickly is that family members who live in Jerusalem as part of a family unification application, who come from the West Bank, are now not allowed to return if they, at the time of the closure that happened for Corona, if they happen to be in the West Bank, they are unable to return. Their permits have been canceled. So some families have been separated from each other because of that. And finally, I would say, I should mention that we have now one case, and we're very worried about it. This is a case that Community Action Center is representing of a Palestinian from Jerusalem who has the same status as everyone else. And this person was denied entry at the airport, at the Israeli airport, with the justification that he was not an Israeli citizen. So this is scaring us now. We're very much worried about it, and we will file a case tomorrow at the court, hoping that they will simply admit a mistake. But if this was a new policy, it would be a new disaster for residents in Jerusalem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Munir. We'll move straight to Ahmad Budeiri, who's a Palestinian journalist and the coordinator of the Jerusalem Alliance. I mean, Israel says Jerusalem is its united capital. The Palestinians say it's the Palestinian capital. What are we finding on the ground, Ahmad?
We're finding that it is the capital of God's kingdom more than it's for any political people. Good evening. I'm sorry if my English is not that good, but this is, I will try to be, to make you just understand how the situation is. To be very frank, what Dr. Nuseibeh have been speaking about, which is very factual on the ground. But since the corona started, all of this wall and all this checkpoint have been irrelevant. The Israelis have gone back to a racist system. Palestinians and Israeli Jewish. And even in the Israeli Jewish sector, they even removed religious Jews who are the Haredim, who are the religious sector, who have been also being recognized as a different entity of the Israeli society. This is what we have been seeing here in Jerusalem. So what they have done, the Israeli authorities, is very simple. They have done nothing. This is how the corona thing happened. 2 weeks after this big crisis started, we in Jerusalem found out that nothing is happening. Nobody cares. The Palestinian Authority cannot actually operate in Jerusalem for political reasons, of course, and the Israelis do not want them to do. But the Israelis who are actually in control of the city since '67, they also have done nothing, and they don't care about doing anything. No quarantine, no vaccines, no tests. Even they are not even cleaning the city as they should have done in the chemical issue. So we started the Jerusalem Alliance. The Jerusalem Alliance, ladies and gentlemen, is an alliance of 82 institutes and even clubs and volunteers who all have joined forces to work on the ground. We cannot just continue speaking about this is the eternal capital, this is the eternal capital of something. No, things have to be done on the ground because people will die. And actually people are dying in Jerusalem, people are being infected in Jerusalem. But thanks God, the number cannot be compared to you guys in London or in Spain or in Italy. And maybe because it is the capital of God's kingdom. And that's why we have been protected till now. But nevertheless, we have been facing this problem. So all these institutes have started working on the ground, and we started with awareness. Because people in Jerusalem, nobody even made a Facebook page for them or gave them information what to do. And they were left as if business as usual. And people were in the streets while people who have been in quarantine in Spain or in America or in China, and people in Jerusalem were not even there. So we started this awareness thing. And then we went to step 2, which is started cleaning institutes, shops, and all these areas were populated. Of course, the Israeli police have been stopping us and they tell us, well, you cannot do it. And when we said, well, we're just cleaning with the chemical thing to get this coronavirus out of our air, and they said, no, this is political, etc. And it's always about the political issue. So they neither cleaned the city, nor they have let us work. Anyway, we continued working here and there, and we succeeded in cleaning the areas. Because we believe that we have to take things in our hand. Exactly what have been happening in the year 2017, when the Israelis put these electronic gates in front of Al-Aqsa Mosque. You remember that story? And they said, well, this is for protecting Palestinians. But we know that it was a political step. Just like the wall, these electronic gates came to make a political statement. And the people in Jerusalem fighted this not by suicide bombs, but by praying on the streets of Jerusalem. And they succeeded in that. We removed the electronic gates. Now, with the coronavirus, our political speeches should be less, and working on the ground should be more. We wanted to start our own quarantine. As you know, Jerusalem is a very dense city. The reason, as Dr. Nuseibeh have explained, is that Israelis destroy houses, new houses being built. So a family is actually 10 members will live in a one small house in a very dense area. And this means that the number of people infected by the corona could be very high. So we needed a quarantine place. And of course, the Israelis did not deliver anything. We took from a private sector, Palestinian private sector, Paediatric, we took a hotel. We started working in this hotel. And then the Israeli health ministry came and said, well, you cannot do this and you might have problems. And they checked the place. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. And eventually they said, this is the best quarantine in Israel, because actually you have been doing this in a very proper way. You know, with food, with the chemicals we have been using, with cleaning, etc., and even with helping psychologically the people in the quarantine, because we need to help these people who are nearly in a prison, but we have to help them psychologically. And successfully, 3 days ago, we had 52 people went out of the quarantine after 4 days. So I want to speak about the municipality of Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the controlling tool of the city, like any municipality in the world. But you cannot say that I'm in a municipality who controls the city and you do nothing, which means that you are not a municipality and it's only political stuff. The other issue I want to talk to you about is that we have a big problem with hospitals, ladies and gentlemen. We have only in Jerusalem 40 beds prepared for corona. You're talking about more than 350,000 Palestinians who have 40 beds. And I wish you write it down, because the math is very problematic, which means that this city, if this corona spreads, there is no way for it to even conceive 40 beds only. Also, we have having a problem with the United Nations. The United Nations, and I'm sorry to say it, that have to do something in East Jerusalem, have done nothing. Absolutely nothing. Even the WHO, which I personally communicated many times to come and help us in the quarantine, in awareness, they also did nothing. And even only before yesterday, one of their employees came to Jerusalem, to our quarantine, to make a visit. And this brings us back to the capital of the kingdom of God, is that nobody really cares about what's happening in Jerusalem. And if a big, if this epidemic hit Jerusalem, we cannot see anybody who is ready to give a hand and to help. The other issue we are having a problem is that our hospitals, our Palestinian hospitals, we have 6 of them, but basically 3 of them are operating for the coronavirus, are in debt. They don't even have the money to buy new ventilators, even if there is ventilators. They do not even have the money to buy new beds or any equipment. And this brings us back to that we people in Jerusalem, Jerusalemites, we have taken things in our hands and we started helping these hospitals. We have started even raising funds for them and bringing money to them. It's not enough. Absolutely, it's not enough. But at least we have by years of occupation, we understood that we are not going to wait for the Security Council to make a session and say that, well, sorry, we have like 1,000 dead people in Jerusalem because the Israelis did not care. We will not wait for that, because when that will happen, it will be an American veto and everything will be finished. So we have to take things in our hand in a very delicate way and not provocating the Israelis. And in the same time, we cannot say that we work with the PA, because if we work with the Palestinian Authority, all our efforts will disappear. So we don't want to go to politics. We worked more on working on the ground. Another issue we have is numbers. And of course, Dr. Abdulsalam will speak about the medical issue. But on the political side, till now, we do not have a number of people infected in Jerusalem. We don't know the number. The Israeli Authority give numbers of Jerusalem, Jews and Arabs, Haredim, all of even Bedouins. But what about the people in East Jerusalem? We do not have their numbers. And even when we asked for that, they said, well, we don't give you the number of Arabs or Jewish because we are not racist. This is like the answer. But this means that the number of people in East Jerusalem who are infected could be very high, and we don't even know for that. Even if we want to go to check them, we cannot do that because this is a political statement. If you send people on the ground to make tests and send the test to the Palestinian Authority, this is politics. So you cannot do that. So this show the racist issue. And also the Jewish Haredim who have been living in Jerusalem, who also go to East Jerusalem to prayers, have been also facing this problem, is that the Israeli authorities have been playing levels of people. So the Ashkenazim, the Western Jewish are now class number one, then the Eastern, then the Haredim, then the Arabs, then the Bedouins, and they're doing these sectors. So even when they come and they'll tell you this is a united, eternal capital of Jerusalem, but they're not practicing it on the ground. It's just politics. Last thing, nowadays we have a new government in Israel, and at last, after a year and a half, they have a government in Jerusalem, in Israel. And this Israel and this government is actually going to start annexing areas in the West Bank. And of course, this means that any opportunity of a peace process will disappear starting from June. There's not going to be any Palestinian state. There's not ever going to be any way to have things back to the peace process. And even the people who believe in peace, like me, myself, are now in a very big jeopardy. What peace we're talking about? If Israel annexed Jerusalem, annexed the Golan Heights with American support, and now they're annexing parts of West Bank, which is, anyway, East Jerusalem is part of the West Bank, but just to make it simple for the people, all the Jordan Valley, all the settlements are now going to be part of Israel. So this new government in June are going to end what is called the peace process. How this will affect the security? It will affect the security. And this is what everybody have been saying for the last 10 years, is that no peace in the Middle East, no peace in Palestine will mean more violence will happen. Not because we are violent people, not because the Israelis are violent people, but because this is the situation. When you have people who are going through this coronavirus, everybody is like in hilarious era. And then somebody is saying, well, we are going to annex places in those settlements. Why now? Why you're talking about this issue now? There are the tens of thousands of people are dying daily in the world. And the Israelis are only thinking now, this Israeli government, which is part of the right wing and middle, which is Benny Gantz will join this government, are only caring about annexing places. In the time of a corona, where all the world is joining forces, the Israeli government is getting back in the deep tunnel, and this is amazing. Is that if to be, and this is the last thing I took too much of your time, is that in the corona era it was very good if Israelis and the Palestinians worked together, because all these borders in the corona meant nothing, because Palestinians were crossing here and there, and Israelis have been also crossing from settlements into Tel Aviv, and so all this wall thing is not even working. And the corona have been also moving from here and there, and even Palestinian infected in the corona came from the Israelis. They didn't come from Palestinians. And while the world is joining forces, the Israelis are going in a deep tunnel alone, and they will take all the spirit, the security, the safety, and even globalization. Now they're saying, well, it's about the Jewish people. Well, the Jewish people are all going to die like the Palestinians are going all to die, with the Jordanians, with the Europeans, with the Americans, with the Chinese, because of this coronavirus, if we don't join forces.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry if I took too much time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And your English was perfect, not just good. Thank you. Okay, we move swiftly on to Rawan Al-Dajani, who is the Deputy Director of Community Action Center in Jerusalem. Rawan is going to talk to us about the family situation, if you like, the welfare of the families and the children. We're hoping her link will work. Rawan, are you able to join us? Is Rawan with us still, James? Can you tell?
Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Hello, please start.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. With the coronavirus dominating the news, self-quarantine became more important to contain the spreading of the virus and to protect families and the elderly. And that's well known. But it's also becoming a source of anxiety, pressure, stress on the family and the members inside. So it actually affects the Jerusalemites in a different way. Especially if as you know, the Jerusalemites are under occupation, so the situation is a little bit different than any other city in the world. So I wanted a little bit to give a small hint about the characterized situation of the characterized issue of Palestinians, the Jerusalemites actually. It's a little bit, the society is a young and it's a social community that like the gathering, they like to go to their families. So this is a special thing. With this quarantine, it made it a little bit difficult for them to move around, and that made more stressful emotions on the family. Although we do not have a specific or official statistics about violence, but social workers think from their contacts and through the calls they receive while providing services on the hotlines that violence is actually on rise. However, there are two sides to the quarantine affecting individuals and families. One is the negative side that appeared in the rise of violence and domestic abuse. But the other appeared in the initiatives and support that the community and its organizations and institutes created to overcome this period of time and keep a healthy community as much as possible. Some of these reasons for the rise of violence is related to lack of space, the houses and neighborhood conditions. Neighborhoods of Old City, Al-Aisawiyya, Ras Al-Amud, Silwan, for example, this is only a few of these cities, are really clusters of packed small and wall-to-wall small houses on either side of very narrow lanes. They are small in space as narrow lanes that go through them. There is already pressure of space on the families inside as there is pressure of the limited space outside. Small houses or apartments with no balconies, buildings and neighborhoods lack space for children to release their anxiety and stress. So there's no playgrounds, there's no gardens outside, and there's no actually there is no organizational structure or planning in these areas. In the normal life of the Palestinians, during the week they visit their families, they go to other cities or other places, areas to for the weekend, but after the lockdown and with the family children number, average of children, between 4 to 6 children. One can imagine those feelings impressed on parents who has to deal with the emotions of children, of themselves, of the ones around also. Neighborhoods in these areas also are filled with settlers. Most of them, if not all of them, are Orthodox Jews who Ahmed just mentioned about the situation there. And they are refused to be under quarantine, and the number of the corona cases are high in these communities. So the level of anxiety and the level of stress on the family has also risen. The Israeli police and the army also still attacking these areas and still detaining children. I would like to mention in particular Al-Aisawiyah, for example, as a neighborhood that has been putting up with almost daily armed raids, even from before the corona began, but which has not stopped until then. Since then, it's also a population therefore has to put up with the pressure of the corona measures, in addition to the pressure of the army raids. So all of this has been also affecting the family, and has been also affecting the violence in the family. Another reason for the increase in domestic violence would be the high number of drug addicts and drug users in Jerusalem. According to the study made by Palestinian Authority and the UN ODC in 2017, the number of drug addicts in Jerusalem was over than 26,000 drug addicts and over than 90,000 users. While the Israeli studies also show that the number was much more less, it's about 10 to 12,000 cases of drug addicts, still the numbers are too high. But the problem also occurs in this situation when the drug user or the drug addict, he has no source of financial support during the quarantine, and is spending more time at home without possibility to freely move or even to use the drugs. So many of them has been okay, I have to finish. Many of them has to do this and to use the drug while being at home. So this also made it so hard for them to use and put more pressure on them. So also they had to go through more pressure due to that. You can imagine the kind of violence that they need to relieve themselves through it. This also affected them by it affected them when they using it, because they had to go either inside the house or outside the house. Outside the house, neighbors would notice this, and a stigma would be affected on the family. So that was also another issue that was hard on the family. The children under house arrest is also a problem in Jerusalem, because children during that time, they are visited twice on daily basis from the Israeli soldiers, and the situation impacts severely on the children mental health, but it also makes the family, the mother and the father as prison guards. And with the quarantine, it continued. So the situation became even more harder on them because they are not being able to relieve themselves. I think I took a little bit more, so I'm sorry.
Not at all. Thank you very much indeed. That was excellent. Bang on time. Thank you. Okay, so next we go to one of the doctors who is operating in Jerusalem, Dr. Abdulsalam Abu Libdeh, who is the president of the Paediatric Society of Palestine and has been involved in, I think, in working within the community. So Dr. Abdulsalam, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your introduction, and hi everyone. So I have 10 minutes to talk about the medical situation that the whole world is talking about it, and it's really a pandemic. So what we have learned from this pandemic, that we have learned that to have uniting the human beings by this virus, but we don't feel this, that we are united in Jerusalem because of the Israeli occupation. We have started working with Ahmad Al-Budeiri and the Jerusalem Alliance. We have started working with, in addition with the paramedics team, started to do a quarantine for people in East Jerusalem. Because as you know, East Jerusalem has a special features and the unique characteristics. Because, you know, it's in East Jerusalem, we have about 330,000 Palestinians living in East Jerusalem, and it's also divided by the wall. Some people are considered that they are from Jerusalem but living outside the walls, and it's really they are in contact with the Palestinian Authority. So this makes really a confusion when dealing with these patients. As a doctor, we don't have efficient numbers to know how much is affected in East Jerusalem. We know that the numbers for the whole Jerusalem area, and we asked many times to have exact numbers, how many people are affected, to know that we have to prepare ourselves. So we have started, as with our arms, to call our colleagues who's working in medical services in East Jerusalem to start calculate patients that they were affected in East Jerusalem, and even so to start looking to do an epidemiological tree to know those who were in contact with these patients. And we have in our looking for these patients, we have till yesterday 148 affected patients, and we have recovered 16 patients, and we are looking for trying to know, according to the epidemiology, all those were contacts and to bring them for quarantine. So we have starting our quarantine in the hotel, and we are proud that it all were done with Palestinian, you know, as a teamwork. We all were doing it as in following them up, doing in the quarantine. If they have any signs or symptoms, we have to check them and do the tests. And here we have obstacles. If someone is affected and you are in East Jerusalem and you want to check him to take the test for a coronavirus, it's a mess, because you have to call the Israelis and they don't. And we have a story of 2 patients that they were in the quarantine and they were having symptoms. We asked the Israelis to come to take the test, and many days have passed and we did not do the tests. And we have to do the test to check if it's affected. We have to move them in other places. So and the Palestinian Authority, they offered us to do the tests for all quarantine patients and everyone, but the Israeli laws refused because of political reasons. So we're stuck in this issue, what to do, and we have to how to proceed. And you know, with the quarantine, why do we need more than one place for quarantine? Because, you know, in East Jerusalem, it's very crowded area. And when you have a few patients in one area, the spread of the disease will be very dramatic, increase especially for contacts, because each family has 6 or 7 kids at home in two rooms. So the spread will be and will have a disaster. And this is what we're working to stop the spread of the disease. So we have a problem by doing the tests. We have the issue of knowing the real numbers. We have to do it through another network that we have to do it according to our colleagues and doctors living in East Jerusalem. And especially we have people that they live in East Jerusalem, but they don't have Israeli insurance. So they can't do it in the Israeli system. They can't allow the Palestinian authority to do it, and to do it in the Palestinian, as officially in the Palestinian Ministry of Health. So we are stuck in part of these patients. Also, we have another issue. The other issue is that the network of East Jerusalem hospitals, even we have 5 hospitals working, but it's not general hospitals, it's an general hospital, and eye hospitals, maternity hospitals, and another for special needs hospitals. And we don't have enough spaces. If we will have too much patients, they need ventilators. So we have, as Ahmad Al-Budeiri said, we have 40 beds. Imagine that what would happen if we have more than 40 beds that were needed. So thank God, things are not going worse here in East Jerusalem, and we are hoping that things will not go worse. But if we will need more beds, we have to do it on the right way, the quarantine, and do it to stay home, advise people what to do. So we even though if the spread of the disease will be very high, even the Israeli hospitals will not have the enough capabilities of allowing all these people to come in. So they have to choose between the old or the young people, to choose between them. And we don't want to reach this issue. So according to this, we in our quarantine, we are taking good care of these people. We are doing our best to take care of our people there. We have we give them the medical needs that they need, check them accordingly, according to the WHO protocols as needed. And till now, we have discharged maybe a few days ago 50 people that they came abroad, and it was something good that we have done. And we, as not a celebration, we were proud that everything was done. But the Israelis came and they gave fines to all these who were standing outside. But we were still doing our work, and people are joining and supporting us, because they know that we are doing it by our own capabilities. But it's limited resources, so we need to support ourselves. We need help. For example, if we need someone is sick and you think that he's a coronavirus and he's something deteriorating, you have to transfer him in a special way to the hospital. And if you want to transfer him, you have to need a special place in these hospitals. So it's not as easy as you think, as you have heard from other countries, but things are going till now acceptable. And we have the problem of those from Jerusalem who's behind the wall. As you have they have mentioned, my colleagues, that there is areas like Essaouiyah and Kufr Aqab and also behind the wall areas. They are from Jerusalem but behind the wall. So we have to do the tests for them, or to do a quarantine, and it's a crowded area, and you can't, and it's a political issue. So it's not as easy as you think, even if the Israelis can start putting places to do a drive-in tests. But behind the walls, it's according to the classification, it's considered the C area. So no one can, the Palestinian Authority can't do it, and the Israelis, they don't have the capabilities of doing it for that area because of the crowded and the special situations over there. So I think even we are doing, just to mention that we have a psychological support. We have colleagues that they do psychological support for all those people in the quarantine, because they have left their families, they don't have enough place in their rooms, and they are doing their best. We are having, it's because we have joined as a medical associations, we have all of consultants and all of medical teams wants to support and to help to pass this pandemics. even we have difficulties in getting arrangements from getting people from coming abroad, because they have to come to the East. They don't allow them to come to East Jerusalem to our quarantine, because it have to be registered officially. But we were doing through Parliament, the Arab Parliament members, to support us, because we want to take support of them, because now we are starting the Ramadan fasting, and so we have to want these people to stay around with their family in the area where their families and with our people. So I think we need a lot should be considered when talking about East Jerusalem and about quarantine and about the Palestinian Authority. It's a story. Sorry if I have more time, or if I'm out of 10 minutes.
You're nearly out, unless there's a final thing you want to say.
No, final thing that we with Ahmad and everyone is working here in East Jerusalem. We are proud we are doing something like this, supporting our people, and we need support to continue to support our people. We hope that things will not go for a more disaster. We have learned from this virus that we are all human beings. We have to unite, all of us, to support for the benefit and the health of our people and the people all over the world. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, so our last speaker is, some people have asked questions about businesses in Jerusalem. Louay Al-Husseini is the Director General of the Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And Louay will give us a flavor of the economic impact on the city. I hope he's with us. I don't see him yet, but I hope he's with me.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll be talking about the impact of the coronavirus on the Jerusalem economy. As you know, the Jerusalem economy is a service-based economy, and I'll start talking about tourism. As tourism is the main employer in Jerusalem. Roughly a third of the Jerusalemites work in the tourist industry. We are talking about hotels, transport, tour guides, restaurants, tour operators, souvenir shops. It's the sector that is most affected by the coronavirus pandemic. In 2019, we had roughly 4 million tourists coming to the Holy Land. Occupancy rate at the hotels were in the 70s. But since March, the sector stopped operating completely. Staff were given leave without pay or laid off. And it's a big challenge to keep the business running without any revenue or income. And the challenge also is that it will take much more time than other sectors to recover. Experts estimate that it will take till March 2021 that we go back to 40% of the pre-corona levels, and to September 2021 to get back to the 70% of the pre-corona levels in tourism. So it's a big challenge. One of the solutions will be focusing on internal tourism, and Israel still needs to give us more access, allow us to move around and go back into Jerusalem, waiting for the international tourists to come into Jerusalem back again, hopefully. Another sector is retail. As some people may know, we have 3 types of customers in Jerusalem. Jerusalemites, whom 80% live below poverty line. We have the rest of the West Bankers, whom Israel does not allow them to come back and visit Jerusalem. And tourists, whom the Israeli industry does not allow Palestinians to profit from their visit to Jerusalem, and directs them to the Israeli, let's say, businesses. Before the corona, just to give an indicator, a third out of the 2,000 shops in the old city were closed because of economic difficulties. After the corona pandemic, things are worse. All shops are closed with the exception of groceries, vegetable shops, and pharmacies, and no income. Ramadan now is that we're in the 2nd day, and Ramadan is a very special month of the year, because the Palestinians come to the old city, they buy, they shop, they spend. But with Al-Aqsa being closed and the shops being closed, they have lost this month. And what makes these days things worse, that the Israeli government passed new measures Friday afternoon, yesterday, to ease the coronavirus lockdown. And starting tonight, small stores not located in malls or major shopping centers will be allowed to reopen on the Israeli side. Whereas on the Palestinian neighborhoods, shops, with the exception of pharmacies, will be closed from 6 to 3. And this will make the situation of Palestinian shops worse and worse. Another sector that is affected is banking. The general tendency is that the businesses go to online digital banking, whether Palestinian banks or Israeli banks. For loans, to give an indicator how it's working, the Palestinian Monetary Authority issued directives to the Palestinian banks to delay payments for loans for 4 months and 6 months to businesses in the tourist industry without charges. Whereas the Bank of Israel, for Israeli banks, issued directives asking for 3 months postponement of paying loans. Services in the banks continue at emergency levels on the Palestinian side, and on the Palestinian side, it's still emergency mode. Return checks in the rating system, you know, if checks are returned by the banks and it's an issue, there is a rating system. After a certain number of points, you're blacklisted and not allowed to take services in the banks or under controlled measures. The Bank of Israel postponed counting of checks till the 30th of June, and it's unclear what will happen afterwards. Will they be counted again in the rating system or not? Whereas on the Palestinian side, the Palestinian banks, the Palestinian Monetary Authority postponed the working with the rating system till the 4th of May. Then the rating system will be resumed again, and businesses will be obliged to respect their checks. This is an issue because it affects cash flow and the business cycle. Construction is an issue because before the coronavirus, there was always a challenge with a permit issued from the Israeli authorities, and the cost of permits and the complexities of the labor issue, and the cost of labor and the cost of construction. With the coronavirus, there is a complexity because the Israeli authorities made some restrictions and obligations. Palestinian workers are not allowed to go back to their residences in the West Bank, and they are obliged to stay. So the employer needs to provide them with accommodations, special conditions, meals, and special hygiene conditions. This increases the cost on the construction industry. And this sector, it's already costly, but with the coronavirus, it's expected that it will collapse like the tourist industry, because the cost will be higher and the general economic situation will get worse and worse. And the Palestinians will not be able to make their commitments. Thus, there is a lot of demand, there is no demand, and there is a lot of supply because of the apartments and the buildings that were built. In general, the general situation is that economic situation, there is a new age, the before Corona, BC, and the after Corona, AC. There is agreement that there is a recession. The IMF clearly predicts there is a recession that we didn't witness since 1929. Palestinians say if the situation continues till May, 3 months, March, April, May, the GDP, the gross domestic product, is expected to decrease by 14%. And the Israelis claim that it will be 2.5 of the GDP will decrease if the situation continues till April. As usual, we have mixed statistics because Jerusalem is without boundaries and with a difficult political context. Same applies for unemployment. Unemployment rate is expected to increase. Previously, it was 4% before the corona, 11% in the Jerusalem governorate. It's not easy to predict how much it will raise, but definitely there will be an increase in the unemployment rates. We're not sure about how many businesses will close, but definitely it will be in thousands. The number vary every day depending on when and how the coronavirus will continue and how we will go back or we'll move on to the normal after corona stage. There is a decrease, there is an expectation that there will be a decrease in the purchasing power, less expenditure on leisure activities, more focus on essentials like food. Palestinians still now in Jerusalem have tried to use the corona as an opportunity to learn and change. They have developed some applications, went into delivery mode. They changed the threats to opportunities. So it's quite interesting how this will develop when we go back to the normal after corona stage. We can see that in terms of new ways of working, people tend more and more to go into working back with cash. Banks are not operating, and there is a more and more need for working with cash. The message or the response, Israel needs to take its responsibility as an occupying power, allow more access to Jerusalem, allow the workforce back to its job. There is a need for governmental support as well, whether in the design of interventions, because Israel has, in the design of interventions, neglected the Palestinian sector because many of them are operating informally. We expect more collaboration from both governments, but the Palestinian Authority is not allowed to work into Jerusalem and faces financial challenges. Again, we encourage people to visit Jerusalem. Welcome in Al-Quds. We hope things will be back to normal soon, and thank you.
Thank you all very much indeed for sticking to time and for the excellent English that I know was mentioned initially, but thank you very much indeed. You got your messages across really clearly. We have just over, we've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to summarize some of the questions. I just wanted to add on the question of children. Think about this. Of course, the speed of the internet in East Jerusalem isn't that good. You also have families with 5, 6 children. How can you, if you have one computer, get them all to do the online work that schools might have set, which we are used to here in the UK, and we're struggling. So that's a really important point. So I'm going to pick out some questions that I have here. So how can people support the Jerusalem Alliance? Maybe Ahmad, very quickly, in terms of actual support for the Alliance.
Well, the Alliance is basically taking care of people in Jerusalem, and it's part of the Alliance of two institutions. Alliance. So what we need is 3 things. First of all, we need the recognition. We have been working for a very long time in Jerusalem as a separate entity, and this recognition will help us to go through not only the corona, but even after the corona, is that even if Israelis present us as residents of the city, but in reality, we are an entity. We are Palestinians living in the city called Jerusalem. We are not part of this eternal city or capital of Israel, because on the ground, this have not been practiced. So first of all, we need the recognition. Second thing, we need the money to support the institutions, the hospitals, the health clubs, and even people on the ground. I will be very frank with you, but the problem is not now. The problem is in June, in July, when people will not have the money to eat because of unemployment. And you will tell me that, well, this is all over the world. Yeah, we understand that. I'm talking about Jerusalem now. I'm very selfish. Yes, there's a problem with the food. Nobody works. Jerusalem, as Louay said, depends on tourism. We're not expecting tourism till Christmas if the corona finishes early. So we need money to feed people. And the third thing that we need is guidelines. And that's why we are very furious of the UN and the WHO, because also they did not even help us in guidelines. We are in there. Nobody cares about our issue. So information could be very helpful for us. So it's recognition, money, and guidelines, which is nasiha. Nasiha in English means
advice.
to give us advice what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. But when you mention money, I mean, on your website, or someone put a link to the, is it possible for people to donate there? Where will the money come from?
No, we don't want people to donate to the Jerusalem Alliance. We want people to donate to institutions in Jerusalem. And it's very easy for anyone who's joining us to find which institution you want to support. He can communicate with them. He can send the money also to hospitals, which is very important for us. We have 3 hospitals: Augusta, Victoria, Al-Maqasid Hospital, and the French Hospital. So anybody who wants to make these donations, we will communicate with. As for the Jerusalem Alliance, I'll tell you, we don't need the money. We're not going to use the money. We made this alliance so that all these institutions can help on the ground. Help them, then you will help the Jerusalem community. And this is the idea which actually I said is a different idea. After the corona, it's not like before the corona. We're not going to make fundraising. This was the old style. The new style is that you go, you donate yourself, you know the way, you can Google it, you can find it, and you make the donation yourself.
Thank you very much indeed. A question from Hugh Lanning. Can we have examples? This is to our doctor, to Abdulsalam. Examples of contrast in terms of the services being provided to Jewish Israelis and to Palestinians. And then there was a question about the kit, the protective equipment, PPE. Where are you getting it from? Is it coming from the Israeli side? Is it coming from, where's that coming from? So maybe to Abdulsalam, please, these 2 questions about the difference in the provision of services. I know you alluded to it, but if you could add a little bit between Jewish Israelis and Palestinians, and then where is the protective equipment for the health workers coming from?
So regarding the protective equipment, you know, it's really an issue. We don't have any protective equipment that has been done for children. For me, as I work as the president of the Paediatric Society in Palestine for the last 4 or 5 years, as I'm working, and even the president for even pediatricians in East Jerusalem, we don't have protective. We did not receive any protective issues just for kids or families or even in the clinics. And this is a main issue for us, that we rely on donations, that to put either to have they buy masks and to have either the good mask to N95 or other things, and even a mask for the face or anything. So really we have a deficiency in that has been sponsored by the Israelis to the East Jerusalem children. I work for clinics in East Jerusalem. I did not receive anything specific, only by donations. And I think in terms of the questions about what you mentioned, the first questions about the difference in taking care of these patients, I think that we have when we deal with these patients, it's the quarantine. They are not patients. When we feel a difference, that we don't get enough resources for these, that we are relying on our own capabilities with as a doctors and the Jerusalem Alliance and the paramedics, that all volunteers for the people that we are doing for them quarantines. We are facing on the ground, it's a hard time, but with hands, each one is helping the other. We are joining ourselves, then we feel the difference on the ground. It's very obvious for everyone. But there's a difference. But because we don't want to have any disaster for our people, so we are doing our best to support the quarantine people that we are taking care of, and even patients that we are in relations with the network of the East Jerusalem hospitals, Al-Maqasid Hospital and Augusta Victoria Hospital and St. Joseph Hospital, just to transfer these patients and do the best for them. We feel the difference, but we need really support.
Thank you very much indeed. Maybe Munir can answer this. I think this came from Martin Linton. Regarding the Jerusalemites who've been denied entry. Could you just clarify what that situation was?
Yes, Community Action Center Al-Quds University, which provides pro bono legal services to Palestinians, has been communicated with by a Palestinian from Jerusalem who has an American citizenship, who spent only 1 month between March and mid-March to mid-April in the United States. He came back, and as he was returning home in the airport, so he actually flew into the Israeli airport. And in the airport, they denied him entry despite the fact that he has the document which would allow him to enter, to enter and return back to his home. He and his family live in Jerusalem on a normal basis, but he was deported with the same airplane that brought him from the United States back to the United States. So this was our first alarm, let's say, on this issue. But also yesterday, actually, and this is representing, we're just monitoring now also in addition to the case we're representing. Yesterday, we received or we learned that a number of Palestinian students coming back from Russia, 4 Palestinians from Jerusalem, and actually 2 from the Golan Heights, which is also illegally annexed by Israel, were returning back from Russia, and they were prevented from boarding the plane in Russia. It was an Israeli plane. Just as they got to the stage of boarding, so they crossed everything before, and when they got to the stage of boarding, at the gate, they told them, you do not have a permit to enter Israel. Despite all the documentation, that they have an Israeli ID card, an Israeli travel document, again, residents, not citizens, but they told them you don't have a permit to enter Israel. And this is very scary. It concerns us very much because we know of the Israeli history of forcible displacement of Palestinians and taking advantage of any opportunity to create more and more restrictions for Palestinians to return back to their homes. Actually, this was the exact way you opened your this event today with people who should be able to return. And now we're worrying that there are more people who are being prevented their right to access. So do I know whether this is a policy or not? No, I don't. I'm really hoping that this is not a policy and that this is just a mistake. But I'm concerned, and we will know that very soon. We will know within a few days what will happen. And I will make sure to let you know, Palestine Solidarity Campaign, especially if it turns out to be a new policy, because then we need to be very loud.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid we're coming to the end. There was a question about contact details for the various, I think from Naomi, institutions that people might support. We liaise with our friends in Jerusalem to get some advice from them. Thank you all very much indeed for participating. To our speakers, wonderful, wonderful information you provide us with. Sad, but we've got a good feel for what is happening in Jerusalem now. And to everyone who participated, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your questions. And if you are not a member of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, please don't sleep before joining. We very much want you to be a part of the campaign. And I think you've seen messages about future webinars, and as you can see, we're also going to continue, hopefully, with listening to what is happening in Jerusalem and doing what we can to support everyone. Ahmad wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just
yes.
One last thing is that I just want to thank the people who are the volunteers. Just in
Sure.
1 minute only. We, my generation, we thought that we are the last generation to have volunteers, because in the 60s, in the 70s, the volunteer world was something very huge. But now the new generation, we thought the volunteer work have ended, and the young generation is very selfish. But I will tell you that we have around 300 volunteers who work in the quarantine in a very dangerous place, in a corona quarantine, taking, of course, all the medical, protective medical. And young girls, young men are coming in the corona as volunteers. And I do believe that supporting the idea of volunteer work in the world have gone back. And this is a very positive thing that came out of the corona. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So thank you again. I don't know if James can unmute us all to give a round of applause to our speakers, but we thank them very much indeed for all the, they took the time. It's only the second day of Ramadan, and it isn't easy to speak after iftar. I know what it's like. So thank you all very much indeed, and thank you for your support.